USCIS knows everything other than the size of my vest, right? I go to the cafeteria, and I'm like, all of the names are English names, right? And finally, I see an Anita, and I'm like so excited. One of the advice is even though if let's say you're also in hackathons or you're looking for inspiration for startup ideas, is you should just go to hackathons, even though they might not seem as much at first. If you keep doing it, eventually you'll start winning them, and eventually you'll meet some mission-aligned people. I was doing the Harvard Law School project, and they were trying to pay me for it. So I went to the Harvard Law School HR, and that's when they told me that you don't have valid work authorization. Right? I heard of the letter O and the number 1 put together, right? Like that was the amount of information I had. There's something called the O1, and it helps startup founders. That's all I knew.
Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving into a story of resilience, innovation, and navigating the complex world of US immigration. We are today talking to Nikin, a tech entrepreneur and the brains behind Green Card Incorporation, a company that's changing the way immigrants, especially talented immigrants, achieve their American dreams. Nikin was just 16 when he came to the US from India and has made a name for himself. But his journey was full of challenges as well. He was not always in the safest waters, and he had to make a way for himself. Now, thank you so much, Nikin, for joining us today. And I'm so incredibly thankful for you to take out the time and speak to all the dues paid members. And I believe that your journey is not just a tale of success. It's also one of overcoming significant hurdles. And the fact that you came as a teenager to the US, navigating the whole thing might have been very, very difficult for you. So let's start from the very beginning. Tell me all about your transition from being a young teenager in India to coming to a foreign land.
Super excited to be here today and share my own learnings through this journey and talk about the exciting work that we're doing at Green Cutting. And that story requires like a bit of a rewind because it starts with growing up in North Bangalore, and it starts when I was 9 years old. So the summer vacation of my 3rd grade. I at that time I was kind of just an average, very geeky kid, interested in science experiments, used to watch National Geographic, Discovery Channel documentaries. But my neighbor, he ran an electronics lab for the Border Security Force. And in North Bangalore, just by the virtue of where my family was, there was a lot of Department of Defense installations. So we're talking about the US Air Force. They had a station there. ISRO has a campus there. The Indian Institute of Science is based there. We also had the BSF, an army base and such. So this was a super unique like coincidence. And that professor, most people might have given like a tour of the lab and sent a 9-year-old packing. But he told my parents that, Nikin can feel free to visit, right? And I took that to heart. So weekday evenings, after school, weekends, I was spending every minute of my free time in the lab. And my parents, when they used to come pick me up, they used to literally pry me away from something I was doing at that time. And the lab was unique because there were students that are doing their semester experiments. So first semester, second semester, they used to come there for Viva practice, do the practicals of their syllabus. They also did their capstone projects, so their final year projects. And there was some grant work happening there. So the central government, they were funding some research in the lab. So it was a very interesting space where if you're just willing to learn, apply yourself, be helpful, you had an opportunity to pick up the syllabus because it was being taught right in front of you. You had an opportunity to practically build circuits and such. And we're talking about the 2000s in India. So back then, electronics, it isn't like today. You couldn't order it off Amazon and you have a Arduino board or a ready-to-go circuit, plug and play, delivered to your home. So back then, we had to, I remember when we created a program, we had to burn it into the integrated circuit. So we put the chip in, we locked it, we burned the program, and then we built the board itself, right? So we prototyped
Wow.
the entire
That really sounds like you were already doing college level stuff while you were just 9 or 10.
Yeah. So over time, right? I mean, initially you're just observing, being quiet, reading whatever manual or book is in front of you. And at the time, Khan Academy was also taking off. So I used to go and any questions I had, either ask the buyers and didis at the research assistants or go online and learn on my own time. And over the course of a few years, what happened is, yes, I ended up finishing the entire syllabus. And whenever those research assistants were busy, used to help the college students do their experiments, and then started helping them out with the final year projects, and finally got involved in some national level grants as well. And that's how there were some pretty unique projects happening there. One was a tabla playing robot, and we were using pistons.
I could never imagine a robot playing tabla.
I mean, it barely worked, right?
Wow.
We could get Sare Gama, but the further Nisa didn't work very nicely. So, or whatever we were trying to program back then, it was effective up to a point. So that was one project. Another was we were doing some border security work. So a mine clearing robot, then a missile detection system, then train announcement systems, anti-train collision devices using like track vibrations. And it was during the course of that. I mean, this is when I was like 3-4 years into doing electronics research that I grew very bored with school, right? So here I was doing some deeply technical, pretty high level work, and with people like twice, 3 times my age. And that I was in school, not being given the flexibility to learn and explore at my own pace, right? So there was a regimented way of doing things. And also, I was always one of the top few ranks in the class. I used to finish the entire year syllabus in the summer, and I used to fight with my classmates for every mark, right? I used to take my classmates' paper to the teacher and be like, I cannot be wrong. So you made a mistake there, so you have to deduct 2 marks from.
Wow.
Oh, I was mean that way. So all that, but still, right, I wasn't challenged academically. So finally, in 7th grade, I think it was the first month in 7th grade, I go up to my parents and I'm like, I'm not going to go to school. I mean, I can't stand it. And instead of giving me a very kind knock in the back of my head and saying, get on the school bus, they're like, okay, let's figure out what we can do. So I ended up dropping out, and I was homeschooled for a bit.
All in the 2000s.
Yeah, we are going into 2010.
Okay. Wow. Even
No,
then, homeschooling was like a very, very in the nascent stage. Even today, homeschooling is not something that is very popular. It's slowly becoming popular, but it's still not there yet. And to think of it, that your family was even then, of the opinion that you should be homeschooled because you're not being challenged enough, speaks volumes about the support that you got from your family.
I was very fortunate. So, but that period of time, this was what ended up happening is I wrote my 10th grade exams as a private candidate. So this was an interesting hack also, which is for 11th grade, I mean, I was at home for a year or so, and that was enough time to drive my parents crazy. I was like, the pressure from family, from society, they were like, this cannot continue for too long, right? So you're like, okay, how do we go back into the system? And that's where the friction came. So we just discovered that for CBSE or for ICSE, what you needed in order to enroll in 11th standard was a 10th pass, right? However, for CBSE and ICSE, they had a minimum age requirement to write the 10th exam. So you had to be 18 or something in order to write or 16, yeah, in order to write the 10th exam. And I was 13, 14 at that time. However, IGCSE, which is the UK syllabus, they didn't have an age requirement. And what you needed for 11th was just a 10th pass, and an IGCSE 10th pass qualified. So I wrote my 10th grade exams as an IGCSE private candidate, and then got the admissions letter, got it like certified for CBSE, and enrolled in 11th in a CBSE school. I mean, this
sounds really crazy to me, honestly. And to think of it, 2010, it just blows my mind off.
2012, right? So we're in 2012. But yeah, this is like a decade ago. And this is even before coming to the US. So, and 11th and 12th, I was in more of a traditional setting and school, right? My parents are like, okay, you've skipped 2 grades effectively by this point, and you're in an IIT prep school. And that I felt adequately challenged because these were like toppers from all over the country in one place. And I was like, oh wow, there's someone who's my classmate who drew a chess match with Vishwanath and Anand, other people who are competing in like the international physics math Olympiads. And the challenge was, I mean, even though I was preparing for IIT, I had already finished the bachelor syllabus for electrical engineering. And this time I could see it coming, right? I was like, okay, what is the next goal, right? And that's when it came to my mind that, oh, I have to go abroad because I was passionate about research. I wanted to continue doing research and embedded systems. And in India, at the undergraduate level, not only the syllabus was static, right? It isn't kept up to date, like year to year or semester to semester, as they do here in the US. So I kind of knew that backwards and forwards. And furthermore, the research opportunities were limited, right? So I was like, okay, in order for me to just continue to be challenged, I kind of have to go to an environment where I can do research and also learn at my own pace. So started exploring abroad. But the interesting thing here is, oh, my mom was super supportive, but my dad was dead set against me going anywhere abroad. So
Why?
the moment, oh,
Why?
2 years, right? Yeah. And the moment I said I want to go abroad, all of that was like shot up without a second thought. So I didn't have any international counselors, like people I could get advice from for this aspect. So there was a classmate of mine, and my counseling was basically buying him samosas in the cafeteria. So every day I used to like buy him samosas. I'm like, tell me what your 3 lakhs expensive counselor is like asking you to do. And he's like, oh, she's asking me to prepare for the SATs, and there's some extracurricular activities that she's asking me to do. And then I'm starting to identify universities. And I was like, oh wow, this seems like a very sophisticated approach. So he used to write the SATs, and 2 months later, I used to give the SATs. So he used to apply to a place, and then shortly thereafter, I used to. So I was just like mirroring his actions. But then I realized that the deadlines don't work that way. So he applied to the UCs in November, but by the time I came to apply, the deadline had passed. So they'd already finished in November. I was like, okay, now I can't be a fast follower on this aspect. And moreover, I knew that, I mean, convincing my dad to go abroad would be one thing, but convincing him to pay foreign tuition, that was a non-starter to
Yeah.
begin with, right? This would be winnable, but the other part was like unwinnable. So I was like, okay, I really need a scholarship as well. So that's when I started shortlisting universities. So are they top 50? Do they have an engineering program? Do they offer a merit-based scholarship? Back then, even today, most Ivy Leagues are need aware. Very few of them are need blind. And I was indiscriminately applying, right? So by then I had like made up my mind that, oh, I kind of have to go abroad. But I was still looking for a top 50 university to go to, checked out their research program. That was that. But I ended up applying to 22 schools, right? And the only reason I applied to Northeastern, where I ended up, is I didn't know that place from a hole in the wall. But alphabetically, it was next after Northwestern on Common App. And I was like, what is this university? And ranking wise, it was 49. So it like made my cutoff, right? So then I applied, and this was the last date to even apply. And Valentine's Day 2014, they gave an admission decision. And at that time, I forget what mindset my parents were in. They're like, oh, we shouldn't spoil a kid for the 12th boards. And so they cut off the internet in the house, like no TV, no internet. And this is someone who finishes the syllabus, right? Way early. Like, even if that's there, I'm not going to be distracted. But they cut everything off. So I had to go to a cyber cafe to even check that this decision was made. But that was life-changing because they not only provided a full scholarship, but they were inviting me there along with my parents with like flight tickets as well. So there was a university scholars program which was created. And at that point of time, this is February, my boards, like my 12th CBSE boards were in March. IIT mains was in April. Yeah, my motivation went to nil very quickly.
Of course, who would want to appear for JEE Main, or at that point, I think it used to be what AI Triple E.
No, it was mains and advanced my year.
Okay,
So very quick. It was the first year, or right around that time that they
Wow,
transitioned.
who would actually want to be appearing for those when you already have a full ride scholarship for a US university? I can feel you there.
And I didn't wait for even other acceptances that came. I kind of said yes to this right away. I was like, oh, this deal, this offers on the table. And I think they also very smartly, they had given me like an expiration date, which was before the Ivy League's results came out. So it's like, do you let this go and hope for another admission, or do you just take it and figure things out? So I was like, okay, this is logged in. Then comes the task of convincing my dad. But very quickly thereafter, I mean, my dad tried his best. He bribed me. He's like, I'll get you home next to any university in India. You'll have a maid, you'll have a cook. You won't even come and visit. You can have the time of your life. Or you go there and you have to like wash your own dirty laundry. And me being like super proud, I'm like, I'll wash my own dirty laundry. And that's a very fun story because I did come here. And again, have never done chores, right? So I do come here. And you know those Tide pods that you get? So I was so naive that I used to cut those Tide pods open, put it in a cup, and then put that in the washing machine. Then one fine day, I was speaking to my mom actually, and I was holding the Tide pods in my hand, and they started melting. And that's when I realized that, oh wow, the washing machine would likely melt it. And it felt like a eureka moment. But then I realized that that's what they are designed for. And I hadn't even read the back of the instructions of that.
Wow.
Many such experiences, right? So I think Anita is a common like Hispanic name as well. And I come to the university and I go to the cafeteria and I'm like, all of the names are English names, right? And finally I see an Anita and I'm like so excited. I mean, there's an Indian working here. And I go excited to meet her. And I couldn't meet her for like a week, right? Like the ships weren't aligning. And finally, when I met her, I found out she was like from Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic. It's like, why do they name you Anita? Well, like, what is the origin of this name? So many such like culture shocks, right? Combined with my naivete, it just leads to many hilarious experiences. But overall, that's how, just to answer your question, that's how my teenage years were like formative. Finally convinced my dad that, hey, I couldn't get into any university in India, but that was more thoughtfully planned and executed than done with any kind of actual effort. And he relented. We got all the documents we needed, got the visa done, and I came here in August of 2014. And finally, I mean, at Northeastern, I could pick my choice of courses, started doing research, and kept myself like very engaged, not just in school, but not only in my academics, but in extracurricular activities as well. So was an RE in 2 labs, gradually became like a program manager, did a lot of social enterprise work, and used to go to a lot of hackathons. So I went to over 20. So every weekend I was in one hackathon or another. And I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, one of those hackathon projects, it became kind of like a internship at Harvard Law School. So I created a website for them. They called me back. They're like, hey, can you make some regular updates to this? Another, a few of the hackathon projects, I got like a speaker. I got earphones, small prizes like that. But then later on, one became the startup that I founded, a medical device startup. So I met my co-founders at a hackathon at MIT. So one of the advice is even though if let's say you're also in hackathons or you're looking for inspiration for startup ideas, is you should just go to hackathons, even though they might not seem as much at first. If you keep doing it, eventually you'll start winning them, and eventually you'll meet some mission-aligned people, and it will result in something much more meaningful and longer term. So that lots of stories and experience to share for my.
Absolutely. These are all amazing stories, these are all amazing stories. And I cannot even imagine somebody who was so bored in school would do all these tactics to just get academically or intellectually challenged by an institution and would go to such an extent. That's an incredible journey. And you have been in the US for more than a decade. and you came here as an undergrad student. Now you're a founder, so you have had quite a journey. So I want to speak to you about, some challenges that you might have faced initially with US immigration when you were coming, because I assume that when you already had a full ride scholarship, and that too, such a generous scholarship, you might not have faced that many challenges. But I want to speak to you about what happened after you did your undergrad, you completed it. So what was your state of mind back then, and how did you navigate all of these things?
Northeastern is they have something called the co-op program, right? And co-op is it's a longer internship. So instead of 3 months, it's 6 months, and you get to work at a place for that length of time. And the reason that's interesting is Northeastern actually advocates for undergraduates, not 2 co-ops, but 3 co-ops. So yes, the advantage is you have 1.5 years work experience. And also a lot of people take some level of loans to come there. Right? So you earn some real wages, you can save up and also pay off a portion of those loans. And you get to try different things too, right? So it's not the same role you're going back over and over again. You get to work in different companies and industries, like maybe do research, work in industry. So you can mix and match for the co-ops. But the one thing that for me, in my mind, I could never settle is who's in university for 5, or who's doing an undergraduate degree for 5 years? That's a long period of time, right? So that was one. And second is I was doing electrical engineering. And one of the challenges of doing electrical engineering in New England, where I was, is predominantly most of the employers are in the defense industry, right? So I remember actually interviewing at MITRE. So it's a defense institution. And I actually did 2 rounds with people who were technical before the HR shut us down. It's like, hey, you're not even allowed to discuss the role with him because it violates our
Because usually like defense programs are very secretive. They don't let any information out, and it has to be within the system that, they are operating in, I believe.
Yeah. And more than that, it's regulation. So there's a list called the ITAR list, or the export control list. And anything placed on that list, no foreign national can work anywhere in the supply chain, right? So cybersecurity is on that list, which means that for any government project, today to, let's say, do a website, there are easily 5 to 10 extensions or APIs, as they call them, that you install, right? And with APIs, it's very easy to build something up because you can plug the gaps. So if you're working on a defense project, you can't do that. So you have to code every component of it almost in-house, right? Because everything has to be done by a civilian, someone with, or a US national with some level of like security clearance. So that was the regulatory restriction. So a lot of people who also came to this realization, they started pivoting to tech, right? And that's what I ended up doing too. So I was an innovation fellow at like a financial services company. I was in their innovation lab, and I was there for 6 months. We developed and shipped an app for portfolio managers. Then I came back to doing research,
Wow.
embedded systems and IoT. And the reason I'm sharing all of this is that's when I became aware of immigration, right? So initially, that visa process, coming in 2014, I received the I-20. And I was like, oh, what is this document? And then there's another form that you fill out for your interview called the DS-160. And the most amazing thing is in 10 years, 1 billion Indians have gotten on Aadhaar, and we can transmit money to each other like this using UPI. But the DS-160 form still doesn't save information. And it comes out every like 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, even today, it still has the same bugs that it did
Yes.
in 2014. So you have to fill out a lot of details. And I remember preparing for my interview, like an F1 interview, having like anxiety, because what do you do when you're applying for these visas is you go and read online. And online, the only thing that there are horror stories, right? So you go to Quora or Reddit and you're like, oh my God, what if they look at like page 4 of this bank statement, right? And they ask about this transaction. What am I even going to tell? But it went flawlessly. Then arrived here. And that's when I became familiar with like CPT, because I was doing the Harvard Law School project, and they were trying to pay me for it. So I went to the Harvard Law School HR, and that's when they told me that you don't have valid work authorization, right? So that's what shut my involvement in that project down. Is that they're like, Nikin, you're not even supposed to be here. I mean, this project did not happen, or it's not happening. So I was like, okay, you become aware of CPT, which means that the university gives you authorization to work for a period of time. So I went on CPT, I did that co-op. And when I was graduating, you apply for OPT. And in this aspect, the Northeastern immigration system or their immigration office is excellent. They have a lot of webinars, they engage through office hours, and just as a community, people are very aware of what needs to be done when. So I never felt lost or that I lacked direction, guidance.
I want to ask you something. So this was all during the entrepreneurial journey that you were part of with professors, that you met all these people, and through them you got to know about the O1 visa.
Yeah. Or I heard of the letter O and the number 1 put together, right? Like that was the amount of information I had. Is something called the O1, and it helps startup founders. That's all I knew. So that was the beginning. And then we continued our work, right? So still on F1, still on OPT. We ended up graduating out of the accelerator. We worked on government grants. Later on, those became contracts. And in terms of that entire experience, so this was 2018, 2019, I mean, it was fascinating. So we pitched to the Secretary of the Air Force. We met multiple 4-star generals. We met a U-2 spy plane pilot. We visited, our office was in a decommissioned nuclear missile silo. So we went to army barracks and stuff. So it was, I mean, everything growing up, I watched on like a future weapons documentary, like on Discovery Channel. All of those people I was meeting in person. And what was fascinating is, I think we were in MIT Lincoln Labs, or one of those places. And there was an uniformed soldier as my escort. And he's like, if people give you their contact information, only then you're supposed to take it. You're not supposed to ask anyone for their name or information. And he was standing next to me at all times. And when I wanted to go to the bathroom, he checked it for listening devices and then let me into a stall. I was like, oh my God, people are taking themselves so seriously. And I had a huge red lanyard that just signaled to everyone that I was like, foreign national.
You graduated in 2017, and then you were working on all these projects. And then around that time, you founded a company. And that's when you actually extended your STEM OPT with this startup.
So I extended it with the sensors, the nanotechnology, and then the medical device. I was incubating it, right? So we had a company, I had founded it, and I was like undertaking the duties as like a shareholder. So basically there's a set of activities that you can do, which is you can give presentations, you can even raise money to a certain extent, maybe some basic tech work. So all of those are duties you can undertake as a shareholder of a business. And that's what I was doing, right? And that's also the answer to the question is, a lot of people ask, hey, can I incorporate a business as a student? Yes, you can. Then what is the limitation? You can only undertake duties as a shareholder. And the red line you should never cross or double, triple check before crossing is running payroll for yourself. I mean, I knew that much, as in I checked with the school. And the school, this is where the school department, they completely, it's the lack of like awareness, right? So for them, what mattered most was job placements. So everyone in the office is geared to do job placement. So you ask them any questions.
I was actually coming to this because when I was listening to your, story and how you navigated the whole system while also trying to make something of your own and then working with all these professors, that's one of the pain points that even today exists. Like a lot of students are very confused about what they can do, what they cannot do. And now with social media and all these things, the possibilities of having an earning as a student are boundless. But there are still some challenges that students face, especially, on-campus jobs, off-campus jobs, and how to go about it. And just like you mentioned, that a lot of students are concerned about if they can have their own company. So how did you navigate all of that? Did it just, was it like a, chance that you were in the right places at the right time, or you knew the kind of questions to ask to understand what your journey is going to be? And what can students today learn from your journey while navigating all these questions at different universities across the US?
My thought process then was fairly simple, right? Which is, I used to read a lot, but I was always like a possibility thinker, because you just have to Google this question: can students start a startup in an F1 visa? And you'll get hit with 200 answers, right? Like everyone has an opinion and it'll show. So you'll have different answers in Yahoo, Quora, Reddit. And I keep coming to this because that was one of the sources of information for me, right? And for me, I mean, I did take that in and I was like, okay, there is some source of concern here, is that people have gotten in trouble. Then I knew like other founders who had done this journey. And what I mean in terms of possibility thinking is, I asked them what you should be aware of, and they told me 50 things, which flew over the top of my head. And I was like, okay, what should I not do? Right? Like, never ever do, or it's a lightning rod. I mean, I should not touch it. And that's what they said, which is, oh, from that side, you can incorporate a company, you can have a variety of titles, you can be the major equity owner, you can undertake these activities, but don't run payroll for yourself.
Yeah, because you can't earn money as a student.
Exactly. Right. So actually the business can.
You as an individual cannot get anything, like any income as a student, right, on an F1 visa.
Yeah. So you need to have valid work authorization for that. So that's basically what they said is, don't go there, or before going there, make sure you're very, very careful. So I took that to heart. And the other aspect of possibility thinking is, like, they were, even at that time, through Techstars and through our investor, there were 2, 3 founders I knew who had done the O1 and gotten the green card. I didn't know what that green card was, but I knew that, okay, they got the O1, which by that point of time I knew it was like a founder visa. And they were students before too, right? That was important as well. So they didn't get into any trouble. That transition happened. And it resulted in something even more beneficial, which is that they got a green card. So that to me is, I just latched on to that, which is, okay, all of the Reddit and Quora things aside, here are these activities that I'm not going to do. And there is enough examples for me to know that this is not just a safe path, but this is a path that has the potential to lead to much bigger upside. You get peace of mind, you have some conviction, and you go about your journey. Right. So that's just a long-winded way of saying that.
Even today, the visas like O visa or EB2 national interest waiver, all these categories are still not as popular as the other traditional routes like L1 visa, H1B, and all that stuff. And even if people know about them, they don't necessarily either have the knowledge resources or financial resources to go for them. So I just want from your journey, so that anybody who's watching this can understand that how exactly do I go about this visa? Because a person might think that, oh, I have had a similar journey like Nikin. I've had, participations in hackathons, and I was an entrepreneur and all that stuff. But I know I qualify for the visa, O visa, extraordinary ability visa. But how do I actually go about it? Like, what all things do I need to take care of to make sure that I actually secure that visa? And what does that process look like?
One is the startup founder route, and the other is the industry route. Actually, you can speak about the third route, which I'm not able to speak about, which is doing it as an artist, right? And by that, I mean a journalist, a musician, sports star, what have you.
Yeah.
But I'll stick to the first, which is startups and being in industry. So on the startup route, there are 8 criterias for the O1. So there's judging the work of others. And here you can be a judge or a mentor at hackathons and other incubators and accelerators. So that's good evidence. There's high remuneration. And for high remuneration, you can actually include equity. So if you have had any kind of valuation for your startup, it could even be an accelerator acceptance. So you can say, hey, I own a large chunk of equity and it's valued at so many hundreds of thousands or so many few millions. And this puts me at a very high remuneration. And the third would be awards. Again, if you've gotten any kind of funding, angel investment, VC funding, accelerator funding, your won grants, pitch competitions, all of those. So any place with some kind of editorial vote. So Hackathon, D-Zone, Dataversity, that counts as authorship. If you're a deep tech founder or doing anything in life science, there's likely poster presentations that you're doing. There's likely conference presentations that you're doing. So those can be included in authorship. Then you have original contributions in the field. And this is much more tricky. So you can double dip with authorships here. For example, the conference presentations. But an original contribution is something like a patent, right? So if you have a patent, you can include that here. Or if your product technology has had a lot of users and impact.
Any kind of impact that your contribution made can also be included in the original contributions.
Exactly. But the difference here is it has to be to the field, right? So not just to the organization. Or a case has to be made that, okay, there are other organizations, users, and it has to be urgent, which means that kind of it's unique, right? So not many people are also doing it. So patents actually come out on top here. And finally, we have press. So this is coverage about you and your work. And you can also reach out to reporters directly, right?
Okay. And once you have built your profile, so is this visa something that your employer has to file? You can file on your behalf, or you have to necessarily get an attorney on board who can do all the filing stuff for you?
That's a great question. So there are two ways to file an O1. You can file an O1 through an employer, or you can file it as an O1 agent. An agent is basically anyone or any entity that is able to authorize your work. So it would be like any US citizen, right? So your neighbor, gym buddy, family friend. I mean, I kid you not, it could be anyone. Anyone can be your.
They don't have to be related to your field. They should not be related to your work, nothing. They just have to be a US citizen.
You have to sign a letter.
Okay.
Saying, okay,
I know this person.
All of the representations that they're making here is true and factual, and I agree to like supervise them and enter or any contracts that come for them, like basically handle those on their behalf. So it's like a sports agent almost, right? So a sports agent is another individual who's representing the talent. And here, this is another individual who's representing your skills and the work that you do.
And then you were talking about how when you were speaking to all these founders and they already had an O visa and you got to know about how it translates to a green card. So how did you navigate all of that? Take us through those few years where you got your O1 in 2020. And then how were you navigating through the green card process? What was going on in your mind? How did you collate everything that was needed? And what those years actually look like for you?
In terms of the O1 to EB1A journey. So coming to my own journey. So in 2020, I went full time to my startup, and my F1 STEM extension was coming to a wrap in December of 2020. So I knew I had to do something. And by this time, so I started the process in April of 2020. And by June, my petition was ready. And July, we applied. So you can apply 6 months before your desired start date. And I wanted to apply, I wanted the O1 to kick in the day before my F1 ended, right? So I think it was December 21st or 22nd, to the day, so to speak. And what was interesting is the attorney actually kept half the evidence aside. So they're like, hey, Nikin, you have a lot here. We don't need this. And I was like, why would you do that? It's like, oh, in case they issue an RFE, we have some more evidence to provide to them. Okay, that makes sense.
That was very smart. A lot of people actually suffer with this problem because they give out everything that they have. And then when the RFE comes, they're like, what do? I just have like a couple of months to prove that so-and-so criteria are being fulfilled by me. But I cannot change what I am doing right now, or I can't turn the world upside down in a couple of months and entirely, change my outlook in the whole industry. But that was really, really smart of your attorney, I would say.
It was. I do give them credit for that. Well, you don't need to have the evidence in order to keep some aside, right? What happens when your F1 expires is you change status to another visa, is your service is terminated. So you actually receive an email with hey, your service is like terminated. And I was like, wow, end of an era, right? So I'm not like a student anymore. So we quickly changed gears because through that process, I had found out about the EB1A. And I was like, okay, the criteria are exactly the same. There are actually two more for an EB1, but those apply more to sports people and such, like box office success and commercial exhibitions. So those don't apply mostly to tech professionals or founders. So I was like, okay, let's switch gears, go after the exact same 8 criteria for the EB1. And this is where the attorney, they included that other 50% of the evidence. And then they're like, Nikin, do you have something more? I was like, that's interesting. I thought we had this in the bag because the way an EB1 is written, it's exactly the same as an O1, right? So even the definition is the same. So on its face, it wouldn't appear any different. But that's what they told me. And I'm simplifying it today, is that an O1, think of it as a 5-story building. And EB1 is like a 15-story building, but on the same foundation. So your burden of proof, the scrutiny, it's much higher for an EB1 than it is for an O1. So I went, secured, I think, another letter of recommendation or two, and we submitted the petition. We submitted the petition in November of that year. And I always did premium processing because I wanted the answer in 15 days. And 14 days later, so this was my birthday eve, I received like a mail from USCIS, right? And these are like government envelopes. So you have like a transparent box through which you can see the mail. And it was yellow in color. So I opened it and it was an RFE or a request for additional evidence. And in the RFE, I mean, they had ripped into my profile, right? And we had submitted hundreds of pages of evidence, and I felt confident. I mean, I had this in the bag. The only criteria that they had conceded was judging. Everything else, they are like, but it's not clear to us. You had a leading or critical role. At that time, we had a team of 10, and I was a founder and CEO. And it's not clear you have a leading and critical role. I mean, my title is CEO, for God's sake. How much more clearer can it be, right? In high remuneration, they were poking holes on it one by one, right? So I felt like a little low. I was like, oh, I was expecting it to be an approval. But then the attorneys had prepared me because that RFEs are common. You're applying for something super exclusive. So it's to be expected. So this I wasn't prepared for. And I think that week, so it was like April or May. I'm sorry, not April or May, March, the last week of March in 21. And I went into like mourning. I mean, I have no better way to describe that. Going back, I was like clutching this sheet in my arms. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? Does this country not want me? Am I faced with this tragedy? I felt like lower than a pregnant ant. I was throwing a very grand, epic pity party for myself. And around that time, though, I had to go to India to visit family. And now to come back, I had to get my O1 stamp. Again, I was like terrified. I was like, oh my God, I have an EB1 denial on my O1. And an O1 technically is a non-immigrant visa. What is going to happen? And I went to the officer, and the officer asked like a simple, the officer actually caught me off guard. The officer is like, O1, that's interesting. And he kind of put his glasses inside, started typing something.
That is honestly enough to scare you when they actually put too much attention on your passport and they look into the computer. It's almost scary.
It was crazy. And the question he asked stumped me. He's like, I still remember, like, he's like, how are you extraordinary? And I was like, I'm sorry? Yeah, how are you extraordinary? How do you get the O1? And I didn't know where to start. So I started at when I was 9 years old. So I started from that. I started going on, and finally he cut me off. Like, okay.
I'm just thinking about all the people who would have been behind you in the queue. They would have been like, "What is happening? This guy is telling his childhood story or what?"
Yeah, and he approved it. It came in the mail like 2 days later. The hilarious part to one of the points that you made is he approved the O1. He knew what it was, Air India didn't. Air India had never seen this visa in their life. So I go to the counter and they're like, do you have an F1, H1, or a green card? That was the question, right? So I was like, I have an O1. And they looked at me like I was from Mars or something, right? They're like, please go sit there. So they took my information. They asked for other ID proof too. So I had to give them a credit card. I didn't have Aadhaar at that time. So I gave them my credit card. I had my Northeastern student ID too. So I gave that to them. I gave other documents from my folder too. And I didn't even check in my bags yet. So they made me wait almost 2 hours while they verified that this was in fact a legit visa issued by the US Embassy. Finally, they let me in. I boarded my plane. But then I was transferring in Delhi again.
Happened with me in Delhi. So similar experience. I was in Delhi in November of 2024. I got my stamping done in Chennai, and I had no idea that for first time O1, you have to appear for an interview. So I was like, okay, I already have an F1, and on the portal, I qualified that, oh, you already have one US visa. You don't have to appear for an interview. I gladly booked my tickets and went to Chennai and just submitted all the documents and came back to Delhi. And I was like, okay, my passport will be here soon. And then after like 7-8 days, the passport came with white 221G. And I was like, now I have to travel again. And I was terrified, And
the 221G also says, hey, come in anytime between like 9 to
yeah,
11. It's like,
yeah. And like, this was happening to me for the first time. I had no idea if I have to book another appointment. I had no idea if I would be allowed into the embassy because I was not in Delhi. This was all happening in Chennai. And I was like literally terrified, but all went well. And I was flying back to New York in January this year, 2025. And I'm at the Delhi airport, and the immigration guy is checking my visa. And in front of your visa category, you have R written, which is for regular. Okay. And this guy, maybe he tried to find F or something. And he's like, which one is R visa? I'm like, sir, I don't have an R visa. I have an O visa. And he's like, in so many years of service that I've been here, I have never seen an O visa. It's like, okay, sir, I understand you. So I can totally relate to it when you said that they never saw an O visa. It's still, very coveted. Not a lot of people go for it. And mostly people are on H1 or L1 or all the other visas. So I totally get it. Now let's get back to the conversation. You were at Delhi airport. You were flying back.
They made me stay around for a while again. Then I flew back, and in the US, they welcomed me with garlands. Right? No, that didn't happen. they also put me to advanced screening. I was coming back during COVID. So this was the first week of June of 21. The second wave had hit India, and they are like, the flight, there were 5 people in the flight. So all 5 were pulled into secondary screening. It's like, what's making you come back right now? And I was like, oh, I have a medical technology company, yada, yada. So they let me in. This time when I came back, I went today what we define as like profile building with a vengeance. Because in the denial notice and in the RFE, they clearly state reasons. They're like, okay, here's why you were denied. We didn't find some conviction with this criteria. Here's what you can submit instead, right? So I was of like 2 minds. One is I can make USCIS try to understand what I already had on my profile. Or the second approach is I could give them exactly what they're looking for.
Denial, do they give out like specifications? For example, if you're looking at original contribution, okay, so do they actually tell you that instead of this, if you would have submitted this thing, that would have satisfied it? Or like how clear are the instructions on the rejection or RFE or all these documents that require you to build up your profile more and give them more evidence of whatever you're trying to apply for?
They give you a templated answer. They're like, this is not convincing, but copy paste. Here are like some 15 other things that, not 15, more like 10, right? That would be convincing for us. Like for example, for original contribution, it would be, they specifically said licensing agreements. They would say a granted patent, and then they have several others, right? So that's what I latched on. I was like, okay, we have a pending patent. Now, how do we expedite the process to get it granted? Is there like some other entity that would license our technology? And in authorship also, we had done a case study on our animal trial, and they said, well, you need to publish, what we accept is a paper published in a peer-reviewed journal. Like, okay, can you go get this published somewhere? So criteria by criteria went and built my profile to what they were looking for. And finally, it was ready in December of 21. And there's also another funny story here, right? Which is with letters of recommendation. So at this point of time, after my first denial, basically, I had 20 letters. Because whenever the attorneys came and asked me, they're like, Nikin, is there anything that we can do to make your profile stronger? Are there any other recommenders? I'm not someone to say no or give that kind of suggestion, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. There's something you can do to make it stronger, right? So I had chased everyone down, right? So all my angel investors, our VCs, the surgeons we had interacted with, the advisors, and of course, you wouldn't take all the letters, like you would just pick and choose the strongest ones. Then professors from MIT who had supported us, other mentors from MIT in the Boston area. But most people provide 6 to 8 letters, but I had an RFE, then had to go get more letters. Many of the letters were also recycled from my O1. So it all kind of added up to 20 at that point of time. And they again asked me, again, are there any more people who can endorse you? And this time I had met someone, and he's basically like you could call him like the father of like robotic surgery or whatnot, right? And super well known in the industry, had founded like multiple unicorn companies in the space. And I was sitting next to him in a table in a conference, and he had and I was telling him, and I don't think he even heard me properly. So I was like, hey, I'm applying for this very competitive visa, and I would really appreciate your support, right, for this visa. And he said something along the lines of, oh, you seem like a smart young man, and stay in touch. And he gave me his card, right? So immediately I came back, I drafted an LOR and I sent it to him. No reply. And then I start following up, right? So every 2 weeks. So this is in August. I start like July, August. So I start following up with him every 2 weeks. Then it got to a point that, oh my God, I'm not hearing back on email. So let me start calling. So I call him, and its secretary picks up. And then we started having a weekly ritual where every week, like on Thursday, sometimes Tuesday, his secretary used to pick up in a very sweet voice. Oh, he's not here. He's traveling. He's currently in another meeting. I'll let him know that you call. And now we are heading into fall. And now we're heading into like, it's November, right? And the end of November. And my attorneys are like, Nikin, your petition is ready to file. Are we going to get this letter or not? And I was hell-bent. I was like, oh, this letter is make or break. I mean, people know him, right? And if we get this LOR, it'll be solid. And so I'm keeping my attorneys waiting. And finally, his assistant like lets slip. It's like, he's going to be in the office on Monday, right? And this was like December 9th or 11th or something like that. That's all I needed to know. And I knew where the office was. I showed up, and by then me and her are like phone buddies, right? So she's like, oh, Nikin, so nice, so wonderful to meet you. And I'm like, I cannot leave without his signature on the letter. And she's like, oh, he's in his room, he's in meetings. Have a seat and I'll let him know that you're here, right? And she didn't move a finger. She got busy with her own work. She didn't even notify him, right? I thought of going there early before the work day started. So I'm there at like 8 in the morning. Now it's 9, 10, 11, 12. I haven't eaten anything, right? And I drank all the different versions of coffee there, including the decaf. Like, let me go try the decaf in that machine, right? So I'm like very amped up on coffee, and I'm very hungry. And when I am hungry, I also get like emotional, like my voice starts like choking up and whatnot. And the reason I shared all of this is finally at 2, someone walks out of his room and the door is open, right? And I was like, this is
my chance. This is my opportunity.
Now or never. So I like walk in, and the secretary sees and like runs past behind me, right? So then I knock and I like just walk in, and he looks at me and he stares at me, and I'm like, oh, doctor, we met at this conference and you mentioned that you would support my visa application, and I'm really like counting on your support. Something along those lines I shared. And in my very choking, halting, hungry, emotional, I was like, okay, this is, if I leave it there,
I am not leaving today. Otherwise, I'm not hearing back.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, doctor, like, today is the deadline. My attorneys are like, if we don't submit this today, they don't know what the consequences are going to be, right? And all I need is like you to like sign this. Your secretary's already reviewed the language. It's all like good to go. And so I'm just holding it out to him. So he took like a look at it, and he like signed it with his pen, right? I didn't say thank you to him. I didn't say thank you to the secretary. I like bolted out of there. I went to the nearest place, scanned it, and sent it to my attorney, and we filed the petition. I'm like, oh my god, this is. So then finally, I went and had lunch also. But we filed the second petition, and here's a fun part. Goes to USCIS. 14 days later, Christmas Eve, and another RFE, right? And at this point, I'm like, my petition was probably 1,700 pages, right? I was like,
What?
I've given everything. I mean, USCIS knows everything other than the size of my vest, right? Everything else is in that petition. What more could they could they want? Or
But before we move on to the next step, I really want to say that, the resilience with which you followed up, I wouldn't have been able to do that, because I would have been like, twice or thrice, I would have been like, this person doesn't want to sign it and I'll just stop. But the persistence with which you approach the situation, emails, phones, showing up, this is like all the boxes checked. And this requires a lot of, what is it? A lot of raw personality. Like, you're not ashamed, you're not you're not embarrassed by following up, and that's a great quality. Not a lot of people, including me, have that. And I was listening to you and I was so amazed that you really, in crude words, have to be very, very shameless to follow up so many times. And this is like, a lot of people don't have it, and that is how a lot of chances are lost, because we don't realize that the person who's on the other end might have something else, or they might be busy, or anything, and we just think to ourselves that, oh, this person doesn't want to help me, so let me just give up and look at alternatives. But I just loved your approach. You just did not leave any box unchecked. Just absolutely loved it.
oh, thank you. I mean, it's in hindsight, it's a very nice story to share. At that time, it was like desperation, right? You're just driven.
Especially when you have your attorneys waiting on the application and you are the one holding your attorneys back. I think it's a great gamble, I would say. And I'm sure I kind of relate to the situation that you were in, the emotions that you must have felt at that point. But I'm sure you have other stories as well, similar to this one. So let's move on to the next RFE that you got. And also, like, why do you get all of these things on special occasions? Like, you get your acceptance on Valentine's Day.
I mean, for the attorneys, they put it in before they go on vacation, right? So they, around that time, they're like, okay, these are the set of petitions. Let us like mail it in, and then with our family, we're going to go for Thanksgiving, or we're going to go. And this RFE, we had gotten 2 criteria. So we had gotten judging, we had gotten leading and critical role. But again, they had like ripped into everything else, right?
That how you have been able to be so perseverant and just so at it, that it also shows in the kind of startups that you have just ventured into. And turning adversity into advantage is something that I have been able to see a lot in your journey that you have shared so far. And I want you to take us through your entrepreneurial journey, and also how Green Card Incorporation was founded.
So the source of that was definitely this experience of, oh wow, how do we better position people who might be fulfilling multiple criteria already, or might be at the very early stages of the journey, just have their work and work related impact, and how do we help them qualify for the different pillars of an O1 and EB1A, right? And more so people who might not have the resources, the network, and even the creativity or awareness to be able to bridge the gaps. So that became the seed of the idea. I met my co-founder. So around that time, Soundarya was writing a book around this topic. So she's a Columbia graduate, such as yourself. She used to work at Salesforce as a PM, quit her job to become an author. And
she's the author of the book Unshackled, where your journey is also mentioned.
Yeah. So that's when we met. So she heard my story and she's like, Nikin, no one applies for an EB1A. So he had done startups in India. Then he came to the US for a master's program, and here worked for Amazon, IBM, Netradine. But he did it what I would consider the right way, which is he did profile building and then he applied. He's like, okay, do I meet the criteria with high quality evidence? And his EB1 was approved in 3 days. Soundarya, on the other hand, she did it as an author. So she actually had an O1 denied before getting it approved in her second attempt. Then she got her EB2 NIW approved, and she's working on her EB1A. So between us, lots of talent visa experience. But what we expanded on was this gap, which is this profile building. How can we scale it out into a service?
I want to hear it in your own words that how Green Card Inc. is different than all the other traditional immigration consultancies. If somebody comes to you and chooses you rather than any traditional consultancy.
Our focus is just on talent visas, right? So we don't do each one or L1s or other types of visas. We focus on O1, EB2NIW, and EB1A. And by talent visa, I mean these are visas and green cards. The US government calls everything a visa. The visas and green cards that you can self-petition. Like you don't need an employer to petition for you. And there's an aspect of profile building required. So that's what we take to heart. And the other thing is working under legal supervision. So everyone on our team who interacts with an applicant is a paralegal, as in they are advocates, they have LLB, LLM degrees, they have undergone training for US immigration law. We also have training for UPL, which basically means we don't give legal advice, right? So we are insured for it as well. And if anything comes close to being legal advice, we defer it to our attorneys. So we work in close partnership with attorneys. So that way we ensure compliance at every step of this process.
Yeah.
And many times people bring non-talent visa related matters to us. They're like, hey, my department is downsizing. What should I do? Right? Or my spouse might be getting laid off. What do we do? I might be traveling. What are things we keep in mind? I mean, these are very important questions, but we are not the best resource to answer them. So we know what we know to do. And for these kind of questions, we have legal counsel that we direct the inquiries to.
To know what is your expertise and where you don't want to put your foot, that's actually a commendable quality for any organization to thrive. Coming back to, how talent visas have become a gateway into securing a green card in lesser time, because now we see there is like a 100-year wait for an Indian to get their green card in EB3 categories. So now if somebody is watching you sitting in India and they haven't even set foot in the US, so what would be some of the things that you would want them to take care of, challenges that they need to tackle, and how they can actually look at the possibility of thriving in the land of opportunities that we see is the US? So how can someone go about it and not get demotivated that even if I go, I will just be struggling with H1B, or I will be like a regular tech guy who would just be going from company to company for sponsorship, and then giving them like an alternate picture of, the possibility thinking that you were talking about?
Yeah, there are a few things that need to fall in place, but you do have a line of sight. You kind of get started as a student, and by the time your F1 visa is up, so which is, let's say you do a master's program and you have 3 years more, or you do an undergraduate program and you have 3 years more, by the time it's up, you can actually have an EB1 green card in your hand. I mean, this strategy, if you ask me what is the simplest path from point A to point B, this would be one of those paths. But this requires, I don't want to sugarcoat it, so probably require, a deeper pair of dark circles than I have, right? Many all-nighters, living, like doing 3 jobs at once, or like living another parallel life at once. So just intense focus, dedication towards profile building in your area of specialization and meeting the requirements of an EB1A. You can file at the time you graduate. And by that time, your OPT period is up. Even if you need another attempt, you'd have done it and gotten the green card in your hand. So this does require the priority date to progress along. But again, one of the most straightforward paths from point A to point B. And when I'm talking about profile building, a lot of the activities related to profile building. It's activities that enhance you professionally. So it's activities that if you're an ambitious professional, you would be doing. Here, we're talking about doing it in a concentrated period of time rather than spread out over several years.
So, Nikin, it's been inspiring to hear your story today. Thank you for sharing everything that you did, from all the funny stories from your childhood, your learning, failures, points of high emotion, your emotions of almost crying in somebody's office. And this was all very, very insightful. Before we wrap up, I believe you have some exciting news for all the viewers and everybody who is passionate about making their mark in the US. Tell us more about this unique event that Unshackled is gearing up for.
Absolutely. This August 15th, we have the first of its kind event coming up. And I say first of its kind because no one has put together a conference around high skilled immigration before. The only time this has been spoken about is at sidebar conversations in like a tech conference, or it's a group of policy people getting together, or immigration attorneys getting together. So the community has never come together to organize something for the community. And that's what we want to do with this landmark event. So part of it is we truly want to highlight the impact that the community has had on the US over generations. Now, all of the contributions made to different fields: tech, sports, media, entertainment, literature, arts, so many other fields as well. It's to celebrate success stories, it's to gain inspiration. But the other aspect is to provide a roadmap. And what I mean is, if there is a 22-year-old or a 24-year-old walking in, what does the next 20 years look like? Right? Because the first few activities that you're focused on is obviously upskilling, reskilling, personal branding, stepping outside your comfort zone, networking. Then you graduate, it's about landing your first job, and then different visa and green card pathways. But let's say you want to start up. So what does that journey look like? How can you start up on visa, go and scale your business? But later on, once you start to settle down, you buy your primary residence, you start making other investments. Maybe you're even investing back in India, 401k, retirement planning. So this is a 20-year journey. And we want to bring in key opinion leaders, we want to bring in service providers across this time frame. And that's even the agenda of our conference. So it traces the journey of an immigrant. So we provide that transparency, those insights to individuals, no matter where they are. So they can go where they want to be, right? So that's another agenda of our conference, is breaking down barriers. And what we want to encourage people to be is also vulnerable, right? Which is the people on stage, the people who are attending. Everyone has walked a mile or more in each other's shoes. So sharing those stories of resilience, of the immigrant grit, and most of all, what we want to what this event to be is to really demonstrate that the American dream is alive and well, and also that dream is different and unique for each person, right? So that's whatever they aspire to achieve. So would love to have all of you attend. So our early bird tickets are live, will be included in the description of this video. And we have an exciting lineup as well. We have folks from the American Immigration Council. We have a Wimbledon star, with Amrit Raj. We have a lot of creators confirmed. So Harnoor Singh, Nikita Gupta, Janvi Shah, several others. We have founders of some innovative tech companies. So Bailey, the founder of Cal.com. We have popular organizers. So D.D. Das, he is a VC at Menlo Ventures. Andrew Young, he organizes tech events. Then we have VCs. So Nitin from Unshackled Ventures, Semi and Tukak from One Wave.
That really sounds first of its kind conference by the immigrants for the immigrants. And this is truly exciting. Even listening to the lineup actually would make sense for a lot of people to attend, because these are some of the careers that people are trying to replicate, or they're already in the journeys of reaching where other people have already reached. And it's always good to learn from other people's experiences rather than failing and then learning. So I am very excited, and we'll definitely put a link to register for the conference in the description. Anybody who wants to learn anything from accomplished people like Nikin can join the conference. And thank you so much, Nikin, for joining today. And it was a wonderful conversation. You inspired me, and I'm sure anybody who watches this video will be inspired by your journey of resilience. That's the one word that I will always remember you with, and that is resilience and persistence. So thank you so much, Nikin, and I hope that we can host you again with all the exciting things that you will do in your career. And Dues Paid will always be a platform that would be lucky to have you.
Really appreciate being able to share my story, and looking forward to meeting you and several of the listeners here at our conference on August 15th.
Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.